Hi everyone. In this video, I'm interviewing Natalia Guarin-Klein, Director of the Magner Career Center at Brooklyn College. Today, we're speaking about the questions to ask during job interviews. Natalia, thanks so much for joining.
Thanks for having me.
So to start off, why is it important to ask questions during job interviews? What does it show the interviewer?
Sure. I think it's so important. It's one of the things that is a must in preparing for your interview because it's showing interest to the employer. You want to show them that you put effort and energy by doing research and preparing these questions. And also, if you don't ask a question, it kind of indicates to them that maybe you're looking for a job, you interviewed because you're kind of desperate, you're not even quite sure what you're interviewing for. And so by taking that extra step to do research, come up with good questions, it lets that employer know, wow, they must be really interested in me.
Great. So how many questions should an applicant ask the interviewer? Is there a set range?
I don't think there is a set range, but I usually recommend at least five. It doesn't mean you're going to actually have the chance to ask those five questions, but you don't want to be in a situation where maybe one of your questions gets answered during the overview or the introduction. And then if you've only prepared two or three, and somehow there's just extra time, maybe the next interview was running late and they have time to keep talking to you and you're sort of stuck, and you'll start to feel nervous if you say, well, no, I have no other questions. So I always say at least five. It never hurts to have more prepared, as long as you understand that you may not have a chance to ask them all.
So a quick follow-up to that, when you say prepared questions, do you mean in your mind or should you physically have a piece of paper in front of you?
I think it's definitely appropriate and okay to have them written. I've never encountered, either personally or advising students, where an employer was upset if a student is reading. Just like anything, I wouldn't read literally from the paper every single question. You could have, kind of notes and glance to your questions, but I wouldn't spend the time literally reading off the paper. But I would have them ready in your notebook, portfolio that you brought with you.
Great. So what are some of the best questions or topics to bring up? Can you run us through a few?
Sure. I actually recommend students don't Google or look for a book that says best questions to ask. Because if you're doing that, other people are doing that, which means the interviewer is getting a lot of similar questions. And that's kind of boring. And it's obvious to them that you kind of Googled or looked up questions. So my recommendation is really coming up with your own questions based on your research. So when you're looking at the company's website, something about an award they've won or recognition that they've received really stood out to you, maybe a training program or an initiative that they have that you thought, that's so cool, I love that about them. And now you're following up on what you learned on the website. The questions are not generic and they're not, I don't know anything about the company. They're really a follow up to the research that you've done that you really want to know more. So I had more advised questions not to ask. Partly, don't ask something that is on the website very clear, because that means you didn't do your research. Don't ask questions that maybe the person again answered earlier in the conversation and you weren't paying attention. In terms of, you can ask some basic questions in terms of, next steps. What can I expect in the process if we move forward? That's kind of a good generic question. You can ask a question around, what do they enjoy most about working at the company? How long have they been here? What are the things that have made them stay for the 10 years, if it's 10 years, or why did they choose the company? Those are good kind of generic questions, but the majority of the questions should really be detailed and specific to the company and based on research that you did.
Great. So are there any other topics that maybe you should avoid, like, for example, bringing up salary or benefits?
Yeah, so my tip is wait till you get the offer. So there's differentiate between questions before you get the offer and after. So after is when you could ask, do I have to work weekends? Is there going to be a lot of overtime? What do my benefits look like? That's after, once you have the offer. So don't ask any questions that are going to make the employer pause and say, why are they asking that? So if you were to ask, well, I have to work long weekends or long nights. That might be something you really want to know, but it may make them concerned that you're going to be worried about working long hours. As you mentioned, things around salary and benefits, I would not ask before. Basically, wait till you have the offer on hand. So the questions you're asking are more around you're trying to understand, is this a company a good fit for you culture wise, and what type of company is this, so that it helps you decide, and then hopefully you get an offer. And at that point, you're welcome to ask a few additional questions. I wouldn't have a list of 20 that, because it sounds like you're interrogating them, but pick those 2 or 3 kind of make or break topics that say, I wouldn't pick this company if they told me X. So decide what's most important to you, and then you could follow up after the offer to ask those questions.
Great. Well, thanks again, Natalia, for joining us today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And for more interviews like this, please subscribe. Have a great day, everyone.